The young and the restless spoilers. The once perfect world that Adam and Chelsea had built together was now crumbling, the cracks widening with every passing day. It was no longer a question of if their relationship would end, but when. The truth had become impossible to ignore. Their love, once passionate and full of promise, had turned into something that neither of them could continue to deny. Their hearts no longer beat in sync, and the emotional walls that had begun to rise between them were now too high to climb. It was a conversation that neither of them had wanted to have, but it was inevitable. The goodbye had to be said. The devastation was palpable, but it wasn't just Adam and Chelsea who would feel the weight of their fractured relationship. The one who would suffer the most was Connor, their young son, who had always seen them as a team, a unit that couldn't be broken. As the words of their painful farewell echoed through the house, Connor, now a young boy on the brink of adolescence, heard it all. His heart sank as he listened to the parents he had always looked up to tear each other apart with their words. The dream he had held onto for so long, that his family would be together, that his parents would be happy, shattered in an instant. His vision of the future, once filled with hope and possibility, had turned into a heavy burden. His childhood, tainted by the painful reality of their separation, was slipping away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of loss. Connor wasn't just a child. He was growing, becoming more aware of the complexities of life, and with that awareness came a deeper understanding of the pain that surrounded him. His heart, still tender and vulnerable, felt the sting of betrayal. Not just from the dissolution of his parents' marriage, but from the realization that the safety and security he had once taken for granted were no longer guaranteed. The realization that his parents were no longer the foundation he had always relied on was a painful awakening, and Connor, like many children in such situations, didn't know how to cope. The weight of his emotions began to consume him, and in a moment of misguided desperation, Connor sought solace in something that had been a part of the grown-up world he so desperately tried to understand: alcohol. It wasn't the first time a child had turned to substances to numb the pain of their fractured reality. Faith, Cassie, and others had done the same before, trying to escape the unbearable truth of their lives. Connor, despite his youth, saw the adults around him drinking to forget, to cope, and he mimicked what he had seen. His childish mind couldn't fully comprehend the destructive nature of such an act. All he knew was that the pain of his parents' breakup was too much, and he needed something, anything, to make it go away. Drunk on the bitter solace of alcohol, Connor's actions grew increasingly reckless. His judgment, already clouded by the confusion and frustration swirling inside him, became more erratic. In his state, the logical, responsible part of his brain was drowned by the haze of intoxication, and the idea of taking his father's car for a joyride became all too tempting. He could escape, even if only for a brief moment, from the crushing weight of his emotions. Connor didn't have a driver's license, and he wasn't supposed to be behind the wheel. But in that moment, none of that mattered. His mind was foggy, his thoughts scattered, and the car keys beckoned to him like a forbidden prize. With trembling hands, he stole his father's car and stumbled out of the driveway, intent on fleeing, if only for a little while. The scene was terrifying. A young, intoxicated boy speeding down the road, barely able to control the vehicle, was a disaster waiting to happen. No one could have predicted what might unfold, but the odds of something catastrophic occurring were terrifyingly high. Connor was reckless, his youthful bravado masking the terror he was truly feeling inside. As the engine roared beneath him, Connor's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. His parents had fallen apart before his very eyes, and now he was trying to navigate a world where nothing made sense anymore. The pain in his chest burned like a fire, but he couldn't face it. Not directly, not yet. And so, the alcohol, the car, and the fleeting sense of freedom were his escape. But how long could this last? How long could a young boy keep running from his emotions before it all came crashing down around him? As he sped through the streets, oblivious to the danger he was placing himself in, the world outside seemed to blur. The flashing lights of a passing car, the distant hum of traffic, the dark, empty roads, it was all a haze. He was alone in this moment, desperately trying to outrun the chaos in his heart. But the consequences of his actions were coming, and they would soon catch up to him in the most tragic way. The question remained, would anyone be able to stop him in time? Would anyone realize what was happening before it was too late? And as the car raced down the street, with Connor behind the wheel and the weight of his broken family pushing him forward, the story of this night would forever change the lives of those involved. Because no matter how fast he drove, no matter how far he ran, the reality of the situation, the heartbreak, the fear, and the consequences would be waiting for him at the end of this reckless journey. What would happen next? Would this be the moment when Connor finally had to face the consequences of his actions? Or would someone intervene, saving him from what could be the most tragic mistake of his life? The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the Baldwin family was teetering on the brink, and the damage caused by one child's desperate act of escape would be felt by them all. The stakes had never been higher, and the future, once full of hope and promise, now seemed clouded by despair. The tragic accident, a family on the edge of destruction. The sound of screeching tires echoed through the night, followed by the sickening crunch of metal against concrete. Connor, in his desperation to escape the pain of his broken family, had made an irreversible decision, a decision that would change everything. The car spun out of control, the vehicle hurtling down the road with a reckless abandon that only a confused and heartbroken child could muster. The world outside blurred as Connor's body jerked against the seatbelt, his head smashing against the steering wheel as the car collided with a streetlight. Everything went dark. The police arrived soon after, followed by paramedics, who rushed to the scene, their voices sharp and urgent. But it was too late to prevent the inevitable. Connor had been seriously injured. The damage was extensive: a concussion, bruised ribs, a broken leg, and a deep gash to his forehead. The medical team worked tirelessly to stabilize him, but as they rushed him into the ambulance, the one question everyone feared hung in the air: would Connor survive this? The hospital room was a cold, sterile place, the beeping of monitors and the sound of nurses moving swiftly creating a sense of urgency. Adam and Chelsea rushed to the hospital as soon as they received the call. They arrived at the emergency room to find their son unconscious, pale, and hooked up to tubes and machines that could only offer a small glimmer of hope. Tears welled up in Chelsea's eyes as she looked at Connor lying in the hospital bed, his small body so fragile and broken. "What have we done?" she whispered through choked sobs, her voice barely audible. Adam stood by her side, his own grief consuming him. The weight of their failures as parents, as a couple, bore down on him. He had failed to protect his son. They had both failed him. The decision to separate had torn their family apart, but this accident, this was the consequence of their actions. Connor had been caught in the middle, desperately trying to cope with his parents' emotional wreckage. And now, he was fighting for his life. The wrath of Victor, a grandfather's revenge. The news of Connor's accident reached Victor Newman soon after. When he heard that his beloved grandson had been harmed, the world seemed to shift beneath his feet. Rage boiled inside of him, a volcanic fury that he could not contain. Victor had been a presence in Connor's life from the very beginning. He had been the one to raise Connor when Chelsea and Adam were distracted by their own lives, their own troubles. It was Victor who had been there for the boy, watching him grow, guiding him, and protecting him. But now, he saw his own bloodline, his grandson, caught in the destructive wake of his parents' dysfunctional relationship. Victor, for all his power and control, could not bear to see Connor suffering. He had always been protective of him, but this was unforgivable. Adam and Chelsea had failed as parents, and now it was time for Victor to take action. How could you let this happen? Victor raged, his eyes cold with fury as he paced around the hospital room. Adam and Chelsea sat, their faces pale with guilt, unable to speak. They knew that they had allowed Connor to live in an emotional battlefield. They had allowed him to hold on to a false hope, to dream of a family that no longer existed. They had failed him, and now they would have to answer for it. Victor's love for Connor was fierce, But he also knew that the boy needed to grow up with both of his parents, even if they were no longer together. It was not enough for Victor to raise Connor alone. He had to have both his parents in his life. They had to step up. They had to face their mistakes. Victor would not allow his grandson to live in a broken family any longer. A reckoning, the emotional toll on Adam and Chelsea as Victor raged in the background. Adam and Chelsea were left to face their own guilt. Connor lay unconscious in front of them, a reminder of everything they had done wrong. Chelsea's tears flowed freely, and Adam, usually a man of control, found himself breaking down before the one person who had shared his life and his failures. The shame of their actions, the decisions they had made, it all hit them like a tidal wave. "We never should have stayed together for Connor's sake," Adam said through his sobs, his voice trembling with guilt. "We thought we were doing the right thing, but look at what it's cost him. Our son is in pain, because of us." Chelsea nodded, her own heart breaking as she looked at her son. "We didn't know how to love each other the right way," she whispered. "We should have let go a long time ago. We should have let him see the truth instead of holding on to a lie." Their regret was palpable. They had both been selfish, clinging to a relationship that was never meant to survive. In their attempts to shield Connor from the pain of their separation, they had only made things worse. They had made him believe in a family that didn't exist, and now he was paying the price. Victor's decision, a new path for Connor. Victor knew that the damage had already been done. The emotional toll on Connor was impossible to undo, but there was still time to fix one thing. Connor needed both of his parents. He needed to grow up in an environment where he could heal and rebuild, not in a world of broken promises and empty hopes. Victor stood in front of Adam and Chelsea, his gaze hard but filled with the weight of a lifetime of experience. "I won't let you destroy him. If you two cannot figure out how to put your son's needs first, then I will make sure he never has to live through this again." Victor's voice was cold and unwavering. "He deserves more than this chaos. You will either work things out for his sake, or I will take matters into my own hands." His words hung in the air, a threat and a promise all in one. Victor would not let his grandson suffer the consequences of his parents' mistakes. Connor was his flesh and blood, and he would protect him at any cost. A new beginning, the path forward. As Connor lay in the hospital, Adam and Chelsea faced the consequences of their fractured family. But this was more than just about the broken relationship between them. This was about their son's future, and the painful realization that they had to change if they wanted to give him a chance at healing. They both knew that they could not continue down this path of emotional neglect and confusion. They had to make a choice. Either they would let go of the past, heal their own wounds, and try to make things right for Connor, or they would continue down this destructive road, knowing it would cost them their son in the end. Victor had made it clear that he would not let them destroy Connor, but ultimately, the power to save their family lay in their hands. Would Adam and Chelsea rise to the occasion, or would their son be left to navigate a broken world alone? As the hours passed in the sterile, white-lit hospital room, Adam and Chelsea sat quietly by Connor's side. For the first time, they understood the true depth of their responsibility to each other, and most importantly, to their son. The road ahead would be painful, but it was the only road that mattered now. In the end, they would have to face the harsh reality of their choices, but the hope remained, for Connor, for their family, and for a chance at healing that might just come too late.